Hi everyone, my name is Tina Varelli and I share my recipes on epicurycloud.com and I'll link to the recipe below. So I'm here today to share my sourdough journey with you. I was afraid and hesitant to jump into sourdough because it seemed so intimidating and I didn't have all day to be hands-on stretch and folding my bread. And it also seemed like everybody online had these perfect results and I felt like I would be judged if my results didn't come out well. So about 6 months ago, I decided that I'm just going to try it and I have really loved it. I've learned a lot, I've made a lot of mistakes, and I think I finally have a recipe and method down for what works for me. So I thought I would share with you and maybe it would help you start your sourdough journey and maybe you'll get the same enjoyment out of it that I have gotten. It's going to be a long video, not like those little quick TikTok videos. I'm going to go into all the details, but in the caption under the video, there will be an index. So if you just want to jump to shaping or bulk fermenting or baking or mixing with your stand mixer, you can just watch the portion that pertains to you. So this is a stand mixer sourdough recipe. The stand mixer does a lot of the work for you building that gluten structure in your bread. I only do 2 sets of stretch and folds right after the kneading in the mixer, and then it's really hands off for the whole bulk ferment time, which can be anywhere from 4 to 8 hours depending on the temperature in your kitchen. So let's dig right in. I'm going to show you this loaf here. This is what I baked late yesterday. And I really love the color. It had really good oven spring. And let's cut into it and reveal it right now. So this is a bowl-shaped bread. It has beautiful blistery crust on the outside, has like that little ear that you talk about and kind of an eyelashy shape. It's really crackly, crunchy, and I can feel all the air inside. We're gonna just cut right across here. This is a new knife that I picked up. It's called an offset knife. It has a slightly curved blade and it's been really helpful for me for cutting into crusty sourdough bread, which can be kind of tricky to cut through, especially at the bottom, because the bottom is where you get that crispy crust. Oh my goodness, here. All right, I think we got it. Are we ready? Oh yeah. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I'm so excited. It's taken me a while. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm hoping if I share with you those mistakes, then you don't have to make the same mistakes. So look at this. So look at that nice, even texture to it. It had a nice oven spring in the oven, and it's just pillowy, fluffy, soft inside, crispy, crackly on the outside. I love this mid-hydration bread because it doesn't have the gigantic holes in it, because I love to slather on butter, to make toast with jam, grilled cheeses, avocado toast, just all those yummy things, BLT sandwiches. You're gonna find so many uses for this. And a mid-hydration bread is not so wet. And for someone who's a beginner like me, it's just hard to deal with super hydration breads. And maybe someday I'll jump into that, but I'm super, super happy with this. So just take a look at that. Oh my goodness, so good. I'm going to show you how I go about feeding my starter. So for me, it works out well if I feed my starter before I go to bed, and then it ferments overnight and it's ready to bake with in the morning, but you can figure out whatever schedule works for you. So I have a clean jar here. This is a 4-cup jar. I'm going to put it on my digital scale. I'm going to tare it back to 0. So I'm going to take my starter that I used earlier today. So if you're baking every day, you can keep your starter out on the counter at room temperature if you feed it every day. If you're not going to bake every day, you need to keep it in the refrigerator. So I like to do 1 to 1 to 1 equal parts starter, water, and flour. So what we're doing is we're feeding our starter. So there we go. I have 101 grams. Then I'm going to tare that out. For my starter, I like to use 25 grams of rye flour because it helps the starter be very strong and active. I just get this at my regular grocery store in the natural aisle. And then the rest of the 100 grams is made up with for the bread flour. So I'm just going to shake this in here. All right. And then we're going to add the rest with our bread flour. All right, we went a little bit over there. Scoop a little bit out. All right, that looks good. I'm going to tare it out again, and now we need 100 grams of water. Now, I want my starter to rise slowly because I'm giving it the whole time when I'm asleep. So I use icy cold water just to slow it down a little bit. All right, there we go. Okay, and now we're going to stir. It's really handy to have a long, thin spatula. I have a bunch of these KitchenAid blender spatulas or, you know, a spurtle type spatula, kind of long and thin is very helpful. All right, I'm just going around, stirring all the way down to the bottom. You don't have to get all the lumps out. I just try to not have any pockets of dry flour. All right, and then I'm going to scrape around to try to have my jar a little bit neater here. Scrape it down. It smells really good and yeasty. It's all that wild yeast that's forming in there. All right, clean that off. Let me grab a clean lid. Pop this on, and then a rubber band I use to mark where it is now, and you want to monitor it rising. So overnight it should rise pretty much to the top of the jar, but if I'm doing it during the daytime, I want it to double in at least 4 hours. Then I know that my starter is nice and strong. So I'm just going to leave that out on the counter. Hey, it's morning time, and I just wanted to share what my starter looked like this morning. Ooh, so it definitely doubled in size. And look at all those holes, those air pockets it's created. Inside, it's really bubbly and active and ready to go, and it smells yeasty and delicious. So this is ready to go to bake today if I want to. If I don't want to bake, I just go ahead and refeed it and either leave it on the counter or put it in the refrigerator, and then you don't have to feed it every day. So just wanted to show you. Let me get a spoon. Just show you that. Do you hear that? That is just so good. That is ready to bake with, full of all that wild yeast. Let's get started for the base for our sourdough bread recipe. So in my stand mixer bowl, I'm going to measure my water and my starter. So I have it set to grams, and I'm going to tare it out or zero it out. And then I need to add 275 grams of water. I do highly recommend using a digital scale and grams, especially as you start out. So we need 275, there we go. And then we're going to add 100 grams of our sourdough starter. I had this fermenting last night and getting all ready to go. You can see that it's really bubbly, and see how it floats on the water? That is a test to make sure that it is active and ready to go. All right. Oh, 100, perfectly. Okay, we're going to add this onto our stand mixer here, and we're just going to mix that together. I'm going to use my heater here and just to mix that together until it's all combined and that starter is somewhat broken up. You could even use your whisk attachment if you wanted to, but we just don't want to have any real big lumps of starter to start with. All right, so once that's mixed up, we are going to come back onto our scale and we're going to add our flour. I'm using a high protein bread flour for this. So we want 450 grams of the bread flour. Almost there. 38. There we go. And 10 grams of salt. Perfect. All right, I'm going to put the bowl back on and we're going to mix it together just until it is kind of a shaggy mixture. I always start off on the low speed and then increase as it's all combined. All right, it looks like it has pulled everything in there together. Let me just show you what that looks like. So at this point, it's just kind of a gloppy mixture, really doesn't have much stretch, doesn't stick together. So what we're going to do is we're going to let this rest. That's called an autolyze. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly. So I'm going to set the timer for 30 minutes and we're just going to let that rest. And what it's going to do during that time is it's going to give the water and the flour time to combine. So the flour is going to absorb some of that water. And if you wanted to just kind of give it a twist every once in a while, you can. It's totally fine just to leave it as is. It doesn't need to be covered or anything. So I'll see you back here in 30 minutes and we'll take a look and see what the rest has done for our ingredients. Okay, I hear our timer going off. So we are 30 minutes into our rest or autolyze. Oh my goodness, you can already see how the dough has really transformed. Look at it's stretching, whereas before it was just pulling apart. So even just that rest really has helped to tighten up the gluten structure of the dough. So what we're going to do now is we're going to use the stand mixer to do some of the kneading for us. So we're going to scrape the dough off. We're going to switch to the dough hook. Look at that yummy dough. So obsessed with sourdough since I've started making it. It's been about 6 months now, and I'm really, really loving the process. All right, so dough hook is on. We're going to lower that in, lock it, speed 2, and I am going to let this go for 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back. And this is going to do a lot of the kneading for us. And it's great because I can be more hands-off, and I don't have to be stretching and folding all day long. So see you back here in 10 minutes. All right, there's our timer. So 10 minutes of kneading on speed 2, and look at that smoothness. So now we are getting ready for our bulk fermentation. But first, I like to do just 2 sets of stretch and folds. And you can skip this part if you want, but this is how I found I've gotten the results that I've been really happy with. All right, so let's slide this guy out of the way here. And we're going to get our bowl out. We're going to scrape this down into a container. And I'll talk about that container in just a second. Oh my goodness, look at how yummy this dough looks. These dough scrapers here, like you see me using, really a helpful tool if you want to get into sourdough, because the dough can be sticky. This is a mid-hydration dough, so it's not as wet and goopy as some doughs, but it is somewhat sticky. Okay, so let's first talk about the container. So I used to use a real tall container, and it was more narrow, but I like this one because I can get my hands in there to feel the dough. And later on, when the dough puffs up, when it gets filled with air and you want to dump it out, I don't want it stretching down through a real tall container because I feel like it loses some of the air bubbles. So I like this. You want straight-sided plastic or glass or metal is fine, but I like something I can see through because you're going to want to see when it has, risen or doubled in size. So what I like to do first, and I like to use my scrapers here. This is a scraper set that I like. This one is a little bit more flexible, and that's great for kind of getting in the bowl. This one is more rigid. I like it for kind of scraping here. It scrapes that plastic well. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stretch the dough, fold it on itself. This is called a stretch and fold. And it's just going to help build more structure in our dough on top of what the stand mixer did for us. So you're just pulling out, folding it on itself. And I'm going to do 2 sets of these, and then I really like the results that I get, the kind of loftiness of the final loaf of bread and that structure that's able to hold the air bubbles, the carbon dioxide, which is what makes the bread puff up. All right, so that is good. I'm going to just lay the lid loosely on top, and I'm going to let it rest for 30 minutes. Come back, do 1 more set of stretch and folds, and then it's going away. Out of my hands, hands off for 6 to 8 hours. Okay, it's been 30 minutes since we kneaded the dough in our stand mixer and did a set of stretch and folds. I'm going to do 1 more set of stretch and folds. Oh, you can see how yummy it's getting. And then stretch, fold it over. If your hands start to stick to your dough, you just want to dampen them a little bit. Stretch, fold your dough over. Love these scrapers. Stretch, fold over all the way around. I'm probably doing 6 in total. Stretch, fold over. And the dough is getting really soft and supple and smooth. It's really transforming. Stretch and fold. I'm going to do one more on this side, and then the dough is going to be hands off for anywhere from 6 to 8 hours, depending on where you put it. Okay, there it goes. We don't want to lose any of our yummy dough here that we worked so hard for. So I'm not going to tighten the lid on it. I'm just going to leave it there on loosely so that it can breathe. I keep my dough, so I like to keep it in some place in my kitchen that is kind of consistently a warm temperature, not hot. Like, you don't want to use the proof setting in your oven. I did that once. You don't want the dough to get too hot. So I've tested this. So we have under cabinet lights under here, and kind of the cabinet lights, it's just ever so gently warm. And this is where I proof. It's in my glasses cabinet. How goofy is that? So what I do is I just keep this in here, and I check on it every once in a while. So you're going to see this ball is going to kind of relax and flatten out, and then it is going to rise up about halfway. It's going to get lots of bubbles. It's going to get a domed top, but I literally don't need to do anything with it except for check on it every once in a while. For me, it takes about 6 to 8 hours. It all depends upon your climate and where you put it. I know some people put it in the oven just with the oven light on. Some people put it in the microwave. It's just like a consistent temperature that's probably, I don't know, mine in here is about 72 degrees, depending on the time of the year. So anywhere maybe in the high 70s if you can find a spot, or else it's just going to take a little bit longer. So we will come back and check in, and I will show you what the dough looks like at some intervals as it is doing its bulk fermentation. All right, checking in here on our bulk fermenting. So it's been about 2 hours. You can see that it's really spread out. So what will happen is it'll spread all the way to the edges, and then it'll start filling up the container. In my experience, it goes about halfway there. And then it'll become jiggly, and you'll see some bubbles on the top. So it's usually a little slower in the beginning, and then it picks up as it goes on. So we'll check back in a few more hours. Okay, here's an update on our bulk fermenting dough. You can see that it is really puffed up. You can see these holes forming, and oh, it looks good. Oh, it's getting there. It's jiggly. You want it to be kind of jiggly like Jello. I think very, very soon that is going to be ready for shaping. Okay, sourdough waits for no one. It is about 7:40 in the evening. I started my bulk ferment at 2:40 in the afternoon, and I think the sourdough's ready. So I'm not going to let you see me because I have my PJs on here. But let's talk about how we know when it's ready. So it's doubled in size, and you want it to be kind of jiggly, like a bowl full of jelly here. And on the top, I can see like some bubbles forming, kind of, popping up. And on the sides, you want to see bubbles. Like on the bottom, you can see it's all kind of spongy. And I can touch it and it's not sticking to my fingers. So all of those things are telling me that we are ready to be formed. whether or not it's nighttime and you're in your PJs. So we are going to go ahead and do this. So this is why I like this container and I like this plastic scraper here. I'm just going to go in and scrape down the sides, and I love how this scraper kind of conforms to my lock and lock container I have here. So just scraping down all of these corners, loosening it up. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape it out, trying to be gentle. I don't want to deflate too much of what we've worked so hard to build in there, that dough structure. All right, here we go. Gonna get every last little bit here. Beautiful. Okay, there we go. Let me just make sure we're in a good camera position here. Okay, that's good. All right, so we have our plastic scrapers. I also really recommend a bench scraper. It's helpful for getting under the dough. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a pre-shape. So it's just going to take this glob of dough and put it into shape and start working it. We're going to rest it for 15 minutes and then we're going to do the final shaping. So under the dough, I don't have any flour on the counter as of right now. If the dough gets extremely sticky, you can wet your hands, but as of right now, we're good. So we're just kind of stretching and folding. I'm going to go around, probably do 6 stretch out and fold over, stretch out and fold over, stretch out and fold over. And we're going to take the whole piece, flip it over, and just kind of cupping my hands underneath to get a ball here. So you want to give it structure. You also want to start creating surface tension. All right, so I'm going to pop this on top there and let that sit for about 15 minutes. Okay, it's time to do our final shaping. So what you need to make that bowl-shaped bread, boule, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it, B-O-U-L-E, is some kind of rounded container. So for the first 6 months of making sourdough, I used this colander lined with a towel. So, you know, if you have a mixing bowl or a colander, I do like, you know, the little airflow that you get through that. So you don't really need any kind of fancy equipment. I did just recently purchase a Banneton basket, it's called. So it's a, it's like some kind of lightweight wood or wicker basket. And I use a liner on it for now until I get a little better at that. To use just the wicker part, it needs to be somewhat seasoned with flour in there so it doesn't stick. But for now, I'm going to use the liner. And what we use is some kind of coarse flour. This is rice flour. I actually made it just by grinding up some rice I had in my pantry in my high-powered blender. So a coarse flour works as kind of a non-stick agent for your bread, so it's not going to contribute to the texture of the bread. It'll just work as a non-stick agent and then actually fall off. So we're going to take our loaf here and we are going to put a little bit of flour on the counter. So we did our first formation, our pre-forming of the bread, the dough, on a counter without flour. So now we're just using a tiny bit here so this won't stick. All right, so what I did is I used my scraper to scrape it off the counter, flipped it upside down. So now it's sticky side up. So I just want to use my hands to kind of gently stretch it out a little bit here. If it gets too sticky, you could moisten your hands if you wanted to. All right, that's enough. Stretching, you don't want to deflate it too much. And I'm actually going to get rid of some of this excess flour I have here. I don't want too much. If you get too much flour on it or on all sides of it, then the dough's not going to stick together as well. All right, so we're going to do what I call a swaddle, a stitch, and a roll. So the swaddle is kind of like swaddling a baby. So you want to pull and stretch upward about halfway there. And then we're going to pull from the side somewhat into the center, pressing to get it to stick. This is so much fun, you guys. And then I'm going to take this side, stretch, and go all the way over. So that would be like swaddling your baby. Oops, I hope you can't hear the dog barking. Then we're going to pull upward down to the middle. That's Daisy. Daisy dog must see a deer. And then we're going to take this last flap here all the way down to the end. All right, and then we're going to rotate a little bit. And now we're going to do the stitching. So you're just going to pull in 1, pull in 2, pull in 3, pull in 4. If you have any big surface bubbles, you can feel free to pop them. I think that's what happened on this loaf here. I think this little divot, this little crater was a surface bubble. Okay, so now we're going to roll. So we're going to take our thumbs, press and roll. We're making kind of a log shape here. Rolling it inward. Oh my goodness. Daisy, we're trying to make sourdough here, girlfriend. All right, rolling it in, roll it over, and now you're going to kind of cup your hands. So I'm pushing in and rolling to kind of get that round shape back here. So we're creating structure and surface tension. That's what's going to help give us our oven spring in the oven. Then you can take this. When you do this, you can see like some bubbles pop up to the surface. All right, I have my Banneton basket here. If you just pull towards yourself, it even adds more tension. All right, that looks good. We're going to scoop up, put it in the Banneton basket. I'm going to sprinkle just a little bit more rice flour around the edges in case it rises up and settles down. It's not going to stick. I like to kind of tilt it upward and just make sure you get all the pieces where the cloth meets the dough. All right, that looks good. So what I do next is I just take a clean kitchen towel and I'm just going to cover this up. Some people leave theirs uncovered. I like to cover mine. Sometimes I end up with too tough on the bottom of the dough to the point where it's hard to cut. So this is going to end up being the bottom of the dough when it goes in the oven. So just a little bit of coverage there. And then this goes into the refrigerator. I usually go overnight and bake it the next day. You can leave it in the refrigerator up to 2 days. Some people even go 3 days. And this is called your cold fermentation. So I'm just going to put this in the refrigerator. And that is put to bed. So then tomorrow we'll get to bake off that loaf, and we're going to cut into this loaf and check all that out. So I hope you're enjoying me sharing my sourdough journey with you. Okay, here we go. So here's the oven set up. So I have the rack here kind of in the middle position. This is my empty 6-quart cast iron Dutch oven. It's a beautiful KitchenAid one. I just love it in that blue velvet color. My oven thermometer to double check my temperature. I use that all the time. And down here, just a baking rack the oven rack below a baking sheet helps to keep the bottom crust from getting too dark. So we're going to preheat the oven. I have it set here to 475 degrees. We're going to get that started. So we want to preheat the oven with the cast iron inside for an hour. We want it to be really, really hot. We're going to turn the oven down then later on when we do our baking. So as soon as the oven is preheated, I'm going to show you how we get our dough all set up. While that's going, I can show you, we're going to put our dough on a piece of parchment. So here I have a piece of parchment paper. It started off as a rectangle, and I just traced a 10-inch round here with one of my luncheon plates and left kind of 2 tabs on the side. When I first started baking sourdough, I would put too big of a sheet of parchment in the Dutch oven, and it would kind of throw off the heat and the moisture level, and sometimes my loaves ended up gummy. So I'm trying to use kind of a minimal piece of parchment that'll be under the loaf, and then these tabs will help me kind of lift and lower it out of the oven. So while you're preheating, you can get your parchment paper ready. Okay, I just took my hot Dutch oven out of the oven. That's over here. You want to make sure you always have really good protective oven mitts. These are silicone ones that come up nice and high. And I just took my loaf out of the refrigerator. It's kind of puffy, but it feels cold, and the top has like almost like a skin on it. So what we're going to do is we are going to turn this out onto our parchment. And this is my first time using a real Banneton basket here. All my other times, for 6 months, I've been using a colander. And typically what I was doing, let me just make sure you can see me here. Typically what I was doing to score was just getting in there with kitchen scissors. And you just want to kind of get under the skin of the loaf and go. I just recently bought an official lamb here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to score a slash, and I want it to go, oh, I'm supposed to be at more of an angle here, all the way down, because I've noticed mine have been kind of splitting down at the end. So you want to kind of be at a 45-degree angle. I don't think I was there. And just kind of cut a spot there. Okay, that looks good. And I'm going to take the lid off of my Dutch oven. Let me just move the camera so you can see what's going on here. Okay. Be very, very careful. Remember, that was preheated really, really hot. So I'm going to lower this into the Dutch oven and put the lid on. So this is going to go lid on for 20 minutes. Careful, careful. We're going to drop the oven temperature to 450 and set the timer for 20 minutes. So here's the plan. So we preheated to 475. Then we're going to load with the lid on, put it in, drop it to 450 for 20 minutes. Then we're going to remove the lid, and then we're going to drop it again to 425, lid off. I'm going to put a thermometer in to check the temperature for 10 to 15 minutes. So the idea is the Dutch oven holds the steam and helps with the oven spring, helps the bread to rise up. So that happens at the beginning during those first 20 minutes. Then you take the lid off, and that's going to help it to kind of brown up and finish baking. And we want the finished internal temperature to be around 210 degrees. So I will check back with you in 20 minutes. Okay, so now we're going to take the lid off. Get a little peeky inside and bake for 10 more minutes. Oh, look at that. Okay. All right, 10 more minutes. All right, see you in a minute. All right, we're going to drop our temperature. And we're going to set the timer for 10 minutes. Might need more. And then as an extra step, I use an instant read thermometer that is going to give me an alarm when it hits 210 degrees on the inside. Ooh, it looks so pretty. Okay. All right, so 10 more minutes at 425, possibly 15 minutes. And temperature. So we're at 157 degrees internal temperature, and we want to get up to 210. All right, we'll check back again. Okay, we reached our temperature here, 210. I did have to add about 10 more minutes on to my time, which is why I really like to use the thermometer, because every loaf is a little bit different. Oh, there she is. Let me put the camera down so I can take her out. Oh, she looks beautiful. I did end up with a couple gummy loaves recently, which is why I use the thermometer. All right, we're going to take out the probe. And you could always, temp it down on the side if you didn't want those holes in it. And then I'm going to lift her out and put her on the cooling rack. Oh my goodness, she looks really, really gorgeous. Oops, that's some of the parchment paper there. Really, really nice. Round and puffed and really, really brown and crusty. So we want to let the loaf cool at least 2 hours. You could leave it up to 12 hours. Some people even don't cut them until the next day, because the inside almost has to cure, like it has that kind of carryover cooking. If you do cut it too early, you're going to release all that steam, and you could end up with, a gummy loaf. Look at that. These almost look like eyelashes on it. Kind of fluffy. So pretty. All right. I'm really excited for this one. Can't wait to cut into it. It'll be like Christmas morning. All right, see you in a bit. We're going to just cut right across here. This is a new knife that I picked up. It's called an offset knife. It has a slightly curved blade, and it's been really helpful for me for cutting into crusty sourdough bread, which can be kind of tricky to cut through, especially at the bottom, because the bottom is where you get that crispy crust. Oh my goodness, here. All right, I think we got it. Are we ready? Oh yeah. Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous. I'm so excited. It's taken me a while. I've learned a lot. I've made a lot of mistakes, and I'm hoping if I share with you those mistakes, then you don't have to make the same mistakes. So look at this. So look at that nice, even texture to it. It had a nice oven spring in the oven, and it's just pillowy, fluffy, soft inside, crispy, crackly on the outside. I love this mid-hydration bread because it doesn't have the gigantic holes in it, because I love to slather on butter, to make toast with jam, grilled cheeses, avocado toast, just all those yummy things. BLT sandwiches. You're gonna find so many uses for this. And a mid-hydration bread is not so wet, and for someone who's a beginner like me, it's just hard to deal with super hydration breads, and maybe someday I'll jump into that, but I'm super, super happy with this. So just take a look at that. Oh my goodness, so good.